Milo is wanting to ask us if American politics are too binary regarding communism versus capitalism. This is interesting. I'm not sure if we've talked about this on the show before, but you know what? Why not? Let's do it. Milo, are you on the air? Are you?
Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, I just wanted to say I'm here from Telltale. Before we get too much farther.
Awesome.
Great guy.
Yeah, he is a great guy. Cool. So yeah, if you could just kind of, elaborate on that question for us a little bit.
Well, yeah, I mean, the main thing I'm seeing is that with communism, it's any move towards even moderate socialism is considered communism, and, people seem to assume that people see communism as entirely not working based what seems to be on mostly faith rather than practical experience. And sure, some communist countries are messed up, but I would point out that one thing in the Communist Manifesto is that it calls for getting children out of factories.
Yeah, I will answer to this first, because I know Paul wasn't ready to answer these kinds of questions, and I know that I sure was, but I'll give my hot take on this first. I don't know about communism. I do know that America itself has already adopted kind of basically socialist policies, and most people don't even categorize those things as socialist policies if we're talking about Medicare and Medicaid and different kinds of welfare programs and things like that. And of course, there are some people who say, oh yeah, we don't want these things and they want to take these out. But I think obviously, in the history of the United States, there has been, a shall we say, religious fervor against communism, against our enemies that, we deemed were bad because they had communist societies. And a lot of that was for good reason. We see that a lot of these societies had people who were struggling, and, that's a fact as far as I'm concerned. Whether or not we could implement those kinds of policies, or the people who originally came up with these ideas, like Marx and Engels and stuff, for American society, I don't know. That's beyond me and beyond the scope of what I'm capable of knowing. I definitely didn't go to school for political science. What I will say is that people are definitely ignorant to this, and I wish if people were to talk about communism or capitalism, I wish it was done in a more mature way. I wish people would have better reasons than the ones they do now, besides that guy was a communist, boo communism, and kind of the general rhetoric that we see today. Do you have any thoughts on this, Paul?
I guess, living in Canada, which is most Americans would consider to be, this close to communist as it is, our most right-wing party brought in things like gay marriage and socialized medicine. That was our most right-wing party that we had that did that. So, but all I wanted to say was, I feel like communism is one of those words that it's a useful weapon. So it will probably never be given the fair shake that it needs, because it's a label that you can throw on ideas you don't like. So there
kind
are
of like
words,
atheist.
There are words. I was going to say the word atheist. It's too bad that certain labels get thrown against something merely just to discredit them without having to discuss the idea further. And so it's weird, because much like I'm trying to normalize the word atheist, that's one of my goals. I don't know that there's an advocate for the word communism, but there probably maybe Bernie. I don't know.
There's definitely advocates for communists out there.
Well, I mean, even just the word, right? There's probably maybe a new word is needed for some of those ideas. But
yeah, man, you got to check r/late stage capitalism on Reddit.
Yeah,
it's one I browse pretty frequently. I'm all about critiquing. And I definitely think if we're talking about a binary capitalism versus communism, there are critiques of capitalism that we should consider. And I think of the recent story with Amazon, for example, not having to pay some of their taxes and actually, benefiting from taxpayer money to some extent. I think that's wrong, for sure. I definitely am not a fan of corporations taking over people's individual lives, and people not having the mobility that we used to. And I think that there's statistical data that backs up that claim, that there is kind of a shrinking middle class, and we kind of have to consider these things when we're creating future economic policies and stuff. As far as, a total dismantlement of the government that we have now and a complete dismantlement of capitalism and stuff, I'm not there yet. As far as, if we're talking personal opinions, I'm definitely not there yet. But I am with you as far as, hey, let's have a conversation about this and see what we can change and improve. I think we are seeing a lot of rhetoric on that. As far as, I don't know. I think I've said my piece on that enough. I wouldn't call myself a communist, but I don't think capitalism is like 100% the greatest thing in the world either. So,
as an outside observer,
call me a centrist. Not really. Don't do that, but
An outside observer, I think I can rightfully say that everything about American politics is too binary.
Okay, well, you're probably not wrong there. You're probably not wrong. Yeah. What do you think about this, Milo?
Yeah, I mean, the thing I would add in is just like with capitalism is that just not prepared for automation. Automation should mean everyone's working less and not people are working for less. Because we're nearing the point with stuff to where I would say within probably 10 to 15 years we could get food if none of us worked, or if almost none of us worked. And there's other needs certainly, but
yeah, I mean, universal basic income and these kinds of new ideas and stuff are kind of hot. I think that's kind of cool. I think we should check them out. See if they.
I'm a Gene Roddenberryist. I think we should all be working for Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Oh, okay. I'm down. Sign me up. I don't know what I can contribute to that, but I think that's cool. Well, hopefully, Milo, that kind of answered your question about our opinions on this topic. Definitely kind of out of left field for the show, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. That was really cool.
All right. Hey, nice talking to you.
All right, thanks.
Good to have a debate with some people who aren't too. Anything but capitalism means communism, which means destruction of everything.
Oh, yeah. No. There's definitely some nuance there, and I'm glad we could totally tackle that. Thanks again for calling, Milo. Yeah. Well, we still have lines that are open and stuff. If you still want to call, we still got some time left on the show if you want to talk to us about, I guess, pretty much anything at this point.
Apparently.
We just got our political opinions out there on things. Yeah, I feel like, this is an interesting thing because when you become an atheist, Paul, did you notice your political opinions shifting alongside that religious change?
That was absolutely bizarre to me, yeah. Because, so for example, taking a look at things like abortion or even like things like communism or whatever, all of a sudden I had to think about them again. It's like, why did I hold the view that I had? And was it just because I was towing a Christian line? And yeah, I have to say, even though I still would consider myself fiscally conservative, very much not socially. So, I mean, obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but I would have probably been uncomfortable with gay marriage. I would have been uncomfortable, even though we had it. I would have been uncomfortable with abortion rights. I would have been uncomfortable with a lot of those things. And I know none of those things are synonymous with atheism, because atheists can hold any view on abortion and any view on gay rights and any view on all those things. But when I had to rebuild my worldview from scratch, that was when I was able to take account as to, again, why did I believe these things? Did I have good reasons for feeling the way I did, or was it just my personal emotion? So yeah, it was a strange phenomenon kind of a year after I became an atheist. It's like, oh, I got to rethink everything now.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely lean more left now than I used to.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, I was part of the Young Republicans Club. I remember Turning Point USA was just getting started, and I remember our group was asked to like submit articles for that. That's like Charlie Kirk's whole thing. That was before Charlie Kirk was, I think, really known as he is now. I never submitted to it. Even at the time, I thought it was kind of goofy. I was like, oh, you're just going to take students' submissions and just kind of make money off of that for your organization for publishing those? Okay, well, that's kind of interesting. But yeah, I definitely...
You're too young, but I don't know if you heard of the show Family Ties, Michael J. Fox's big break.
I never watched Family Ties. I know what it is. I've never really seen it.
Michael J. Fox's character's name was Alex P. Keaton, and he was the ultimate Republican in that show. And he's actually who I named my son after. I was so Republican and so in that mindset that my son is actually named after that character. So, yeah, so it's weird to look back.
Yeah, just to be clear, if you're a Republican and you want to talk to us and be on the show and stuff, we're cool. We're not in that camp as much anymore.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
there are atheists who are Republican and who are right leaning, like a lot more than what people would think, which is really, really interesting.
Well, of course, in Canada we have 9 parties on our ballot, so it's not, we don't have that same binary system that you can choose something where someone is okay with social programs, but also doesn't want to go into debt. Where unfortunately in the States, you sometimes have to make, I think no matter what party you go with, there's a Sophie's choice. You're like, I disagree with them on X, Y, and Z. So you kind of have to pick the things you care about most.
Yeah, I want to, this topic is so interesting to me. And I don't think we've really explored this much on the show. I just want to go back to this real quick because we're talking about like religious beliefs that influence our political kind of stakeholders. Maybe I have mentioned this story before, but like one of the things that really got me, because there are logical arguments to get me to where I am, and there are also emotional arguments that got to me to where I am. And one of those emotional arguments was the treatment of the LGBT community in particular from Christianity. And, like the kind of Jesus character that I knew growing up, obviously didn't actually say anything about LGBT people. Not really. I mean, there's a thing about eunuchs, but like it doesn't really count, at least in the conversations that we're having, right? It was always, I didn't realize how much of that was really coming from the mouthpieces of religious leaders in the community and stuff. And I remember in the college group I was in, hearing about a talk that was being given on gay conversion therapy and stuff. And this was right at the time when I was really learning about this kind of stuff, learning how this was just complete pseudoscience and stuff, and how people were being hurt. And I got into an argument with some people in my kind of college group. I was like, we can't be talking about this way. This is harmful. This has been harming people. And I think if we're going to be Christians, we need to be concerned about the welfare of people and how they're living their lives, and not be concerned as much as harming them in this way. And that conversation I remember having with people really struck with me, because I realized these people didn't have that perspective. They always had the perspective of people are gay because there's something internally wrong with them, or, they're sinning in some sort of way, or they know that it's wrong and that, God is trying to tell them otherwise. And it just made me realize how much of that belief was just completely based on just religious thinking and not really any sort of logical, metric outside of that, if that makes sense.
It does. The inverse of that is also true. It's interesting that everyone's God has the same prejudices that they have. So you can always create the God in your likeness that, oh, I don't like X, Y, and Z. So it's the same reason you'll have like prosperity gospel people and also social gospel people who want to do everything to feed people. The Bible and most religions are so malleable that whatever you want to pick and choose, you could create a God and justify it to just carry forth the same opinion you already have.
Yeah, until you run into some apologist or some other, and then you get debates started. But that's really what's hard for me, because we had a caller last week that was asking me what I thought about like why I didn't believe in God specifically, I guess was the question that he had, and what arguments I had against God, I think was more specifically what he was asking. And it's almost like, okay, well, you have to pick which one, because even in Christianity, there's just so many different kind of versions of these beliefs and stuff. And I don't have one argument that covers all of them, really. I just have inferences and like general conclusions I have about specific versions of this God and these beliefs. And I really don't like the fact when people are talking about Christianity where there's this assumption that there's just this one version of it that's true, and then there's a bunch of heretics, because that's literally what all the Christians believe about their own beliefs, and right. It's an endless talking point. Although
it's funny because the young Earth creationist God is one of the ones I say definitely does not exist. Like there might be a God, but the 6,000-year God I now put in the shelf of impossible. Just much like we all say, lightning doesn't come from Thor, so Thor is on the impossible shelf. I think maybe the Christian God could exist. I don't have sufficient evidence for that, but definitely not the 6,000-year young Earth creation God. That one doesn't exist.
Okay, well, Paul, well, let me play devil's advocate for you here. You know, maybe the evidence you found, you know, doesn't really fit this 6,000-year-old world hypothesis. But what if God just made it kind of look like that? And, you know, it's just the way that God made things, and he doesn't have to explain himself to you.
Well, God in the Bible says that that he is not the God of deceit. So that immediately puts you into God as being the deceiver God at that point, because he's created things with an appearance the way he didn't. And that God is going to lead people astray unnecessarily because he's going to be fooling people. Now, Kent Hovind thinks this is a positive attribute of God. He actually says that if I was God and I was writing the Bible, I would deliberately put contradictions in it to weed out the people who don't want to believe.
Really? He says that?
Yeah. He would, and that putting in some stuff that looks like, oh, maybe carbon dating or radiometric dating shows billions of years. That's to test people's faith, and that's to make sure that only the good ones get in. But,
oh my gosh!
No, to your
I haven't heard that one. That's a new one to me. Wow.
I'll have to send you some clips. It's juicy and delicious. But I mean, could we all have been? That almost goes to like last Thursdayism. Is it possible that God made us all last Thursday with memories of what happened? Well, maybe. And that actually goes to my new series about knowledge. Not to plug my channel, but there's a knowledge. I'm doing one based on some.
Plug it right now.
Truth. I just recently, my last video is called Truth Without God, which is exploring, you know, the idea that some people will say, without God, you can't even talk about truth. And the thing I put forward, the shorthand of it is, well, as long as we're all measuring against reality, it doesn't matter, because if God is real, he's a subset of reality. And if there is no God, we still want to measure against reality. So as long as we all measure against reality, we can all come to the same conclusion, God or not. And then the follow-up to that is going to be about knowledge without God. Some people say you can't know anything without God, and, you know, that's a whole mess.
I was just about to ask you about that. I guess you don't want to go into it now, but like, that's something that comes up. That's come up on this show, like presuppositionalism and stuff. And I have my own ideas of how to tackle that, but can you give a teaser? Just a little? Yeah.
Also, the way to deal with presupposition is to acknowledge, when I first came out of this, I was afraid to acknowledge that I had my own presuppositions, but we all do. That's what I had to come to grips with, is that none of us can justify everything. The whole last Thursdayism or the brain in a vat or Matrix. So the way to deal with the presuppositionalist is to acknowledge first that you have some. So I have two presuppositions, that the universe exists and that we can learn things about it. I have those two presuppositions. I cannot justify those. There's nothing, no philosophy, nothing can really justify those. So if I stand on saying, okay, the universe exists and we can learn things about it, that is less of an assumption than there is a God, because we all look around and we see the universe. We all look around and we find out that we realize that gravity worked yesterday and gravity still works today. Every time I drop my pen, that doesn't guarantee that next time I drop my pen, it's not going to fall. But at least we have some concrete. If your presupposition, like an Eric Hovind, is that God exists, that hasn't been demonstrated. So you're at least, that presupposition is a little bit harder to swallow than my two presuppositions. And generally, I can get a young Earth creationist to agree that the universe exists and that we can learn things about it. So that's, and then it takes away their fight, the struggle of presuppositionalist, just the idea that we have presuppositions. So I would say, if you are arguing with a theist, grant them that you are assuming those two things, and maybe you want to have more, without fighting them on it, so that you can get to a more fruitful conversation than just the idea of whether presuppositions are good or bad. Because honestly, we can't really justify those two things that I mentioned. We just take them as axiomatic.
Yeah, Yeah, no, for sure. I work with a similar set of axioms that I can't remember off the top of my head, and I always forget. And I keep them on a list on my phone just so when I have discussions like this, I can bring them up. I think it's something along the lines of like, I exist and like evidence, like physical evidence is a good way to come to, or physical evidence can tell us things about the world or something like that. You know, something pretty similar to what you've got going on.
If I added a third one, it would be that that ideas with predictive power are better than ideas without predictive power.
Interesting. Yeah, I like that one. But yeah, that's an interesting side tangent that I'm glad we touched upon because it has come up several times, and
has it been helpful in those? Like, does it?
Oh, for sure.
Does it help break down the barriers a bit?
I think so because I think this is a really like people struggle with precept stuff. I notice when they have these conversations, and at least the ones that I've seen online, and I don't think it's as difficult as people make it out to be necessarily. But I also know that, you know, it would where I'm at now as a person, a precept argument would just never convince me. You know, it just wouldn't get me anywhere. I think you just have to have a little bit more if we're talking about as big of a thing as the God of the universe and some others, all the stuff that comes along with that, you know?
The other shoe to drop on the precept is it's basically comes down to confidence levels, and no amount of the preceptor knows divinely, and they say, well, you only say that you probably know, so therefore my argument is better than yours based on our confidence levels.
Right.
Is of course ridiculous, but they phrase it cleverly, so you're not thinking about the fact that they're trying to win just because they're more confident of their idea than you are.
Yes.
The confidence level in your idea has nothing to do with the truth of the idea. I could have the truth and doubt it, and you can have something false and be. So that's the other level. Is just remember that confidence doesn't mean correctness.
For sure.